Thank you, committee members. This work is not glamorous, but it is important. I certainly appreciate your commitment to finding the best possible person to serve as president of this university. This time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to our committee chair, Dr. Randy Moffitt. Dr. Moffitt.
Thank you, Mr. Seville. First of all, I want to thank all of you for being here, but I have a question. Can y'all hear us? Are the microphones? Committee members, I'll remind you, in some cases you might need to reach, but I can also tell you that you cannot lift these. They must weigh at least 1,000 pounds. I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, but if at any time in my comments or anyone else, if you're having trouble hearing us, please let us know. Again, I think you've heard from the members of our board and search committee that we are very, very excited about the University of New Orleans, and I hate to say the prospects, but the future of the University of New Orleans becoming a part of the University of Louisiana system. We're also very excited to be here on the campus today. I just told Mr. Parker, I think that UNO is unique in many ways, but I think Mr. Parker and I agree that we don't really get to have a meeting on any campus where we have a view like this. So if we get distracted, it's not because we're uninterested. The lake has taken our attention away from our business. But we are here, and we do have some business to conduct this morning, and we're going to go through those activities. And then, as Mr. Seville will remind you later on, we have a very important meeting after lunch where we really want to hear from you and others in the community about the importance, characteristics, et cetera, that you and others are looking for in the next president. Search committee members, I would ask you got a binder in front of you, and we're going to work through some of those items as we go through this morning. For our search committee members and for the audience, this is the first time our group has been together. We've had a lot of conversations as we planned this meeting and as we've assembled, Mr. Seville assembled the committee. But there's some material in here that we need to cover kind of as a routine and formally approve as we work through the morning. I would ask you also to keep that folder with you and bring it to subsequent meetings, because we'll probably be adding some material to it as we move through the process. The first item I'd ask you to do is look at the materials in tab 2, which is the charge of the committee. And for those members that have not served before, and for the audience, the process that we use is one that was established probably 12 or 13 years ago. And we've used it almost identically to that original model over that 12 or 13 years. And I think maybe it was Renee a moment ago. This will be, I've been system president since July of '08, and this will actually be our 5th presidential search. So we don't run presidents off. I want to be clear about that. We had some retirements and some people had some opportunities elsewhere. But again, we followed this process. I think it works very well, and as we go through it this morning, we'll talk a little bit more about it. But committee members, if you'll look at that, you'll see that the charge of the committee, of course, is to establish a procedure or timeline, and we'll do that as we move through the day. Engage the services of a search consultant, and we've already initiated those conversations, and we'll be using, hopefully, we'll be using the same firm that we used the last 2 searches. We'll talk more about that. Secondly, a very important step is to visit the campus early in the process and obtain public input on the search process and characteristics, and that's our 1 p.m. session this afternoon. Very important task for the search committee, and this is all members of the search committee. As we get applicants for this position, the real work of this committee is going to be to review those, look at the characteristics that we've established in terms of qualifications, and I hope, and I believe my hope will come to fruition, face a very hard challenge in terms of selecting from a qualified pool the persons that we'll want to interview. And then, of course, we will be back after checking references and doing those things and identifying those individuals. We'll bring the semifinalists back to the UNO campus for interviews to be conducted here, not only by this committee, but during that interview process, there will be a chance for questions from the public. And then there will be a series of meetings with senior administrators, faculty, students, community, and business leaders to talk with and meet the candidates. And then the last task of the search committee is to recommend at least 2, or a minimum of 2, qualified candidates to the full board for the selection of the next president. We have a substantial number of our board on this committee, but there are some members that are not. And so when we reach that process, the work of the search committee is over, and the final decision then rests with the full board of supervisors. As I mentioned earlier, we have already engaged services of R.H. Perry and Associates. They have assisted us in our last two searches at McNeese State University and the University of Louisiana at Monroe. We've already had a preliminary discussion with them about candidates, and I'm pleased to indicate that Mr. Alan Koenig, who heads up their activities for us, has already indicated that there have been numerous people express interest in this position, and we've really not advertised the position. So I think that speaks well for the University of New Orleans. The charge of the committee is established within our board rules, but I would ask you to also look at tab 3. Tab 3 outlines really the search process within our rules and PPMs. And of course, some of that's already been done with the appointment of the committee. It details a little bit of the selection process that I've talked about. It also has an identification in a generic way of the credentials that we look for in a candidate. We expect them to have an earned doctorate from an accredited institution. We want them to have successful experience, senior leadership experience in an institution of higher ed. We also have a statement in our rules that in the cases of an exceptional case, a candidate having an extraordinary record of leadership and accomplishments, but lacking one or more of the above can be considered for the position. And those are generally the same process and same rules and so forth that we've used. The next part of that just details what Mr. Seville talked about earlier. That's the composition of the committee and the advisory committee members that can be appointed. I think Mr. Seville did an excellent job of speaking to this issue a minute ago, but as this committee unfolds, I think our advisory committee members will come to believe that they are an equal part. Our board rules only allow board members to vote. I don't vote. But the dialogue becomes pretty intense, and the dialogue is participated in on an equal basis by all partners, because we want the input of everyone to find the very best candidate that we can. Are there any questions that I can answer from our board members or new members of our search committee, or the first time about our charge or the overview of our process? Anyone have a question at this point? John or John, our two student members have the same name. Mr. Solomon, anyone have a question? Okay, then, Mr. Seville, I think we need a motion to accept this charge.
Chair, I'll entertain a motion. Mr. Long moves. Do I have a second? Second. Mr. Laparola seconds. Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none. So on.
I referred to tab 4 also as we were working through that. And again, in that tab is kind of an overview of the search process that I've described and Mr. Seville has also spoken to. The committee will find, and I think the community too, there has been a lot of work and there's work ongoing, but the pace will sometimes seem a little slow as we begin the process. And it intensifies as we move towards, we'll talk about our calendar in a moment, as we move towards that process of selecting the semifinalists and bringing them here for our interviews on this campus.